Hey there, welcome back. This is Project Embryo, a virtual reality sci-fi survival horror inspired by the classic of the genre. Today, we have a bit of a mixed episode. Having completed the bulk of the environment and level design for the first game level, I wanted to wrap it all up with some final polish to present it as a playable demo. The first thing I did to enable a proper playtest on the level difficulty was to finalize the implementation of the player's health. To do this, I created an effect that tinted the edges of the player view red. Perhaps is not the lightest solution, but the quickest one I found was to create a normally hidden sphere around the player's face with a red gradient as a material. When hit, the gradient becomes visible and expands with an animation, then fades away. With each hit, a hidden number of health points decreases, and when it reaches 0, the screen turns completely red. It works well, with the small issue that we respawn at the beginning of the level each time. Game saves, checkpoints, loading, these are the stuff of nightmare for me. I've never dealt with them before and I didn't know where to start. The initial implementation attempt I made was about saving the player's position and the position of interactable objects. Seemed like an easy thing, but there are some heavy complications. The worst one out of them all is that we can insert an object into an inventory. Seems an easy thing to do, right? Except for the fact that if we bring the object out of the inventory, it's technically not the same object that we've inserted, because when we insert an object into an inventory, it gets deleted, and then, when we extract it from the inventory, it gets created again. It's technically a new object for the game. They are Object 1 and Object 2. When I save the game, it saves the position of Object 2, but when I reload it, it starts the level from scratch, and Object 2 doesn't exist, Object 1 exists. So it looks for Object 2 to move it, but not finding it, it does nothing, and of course it doesn't move Object 1 either, because it was destroyed when the game was saved. Resolving this was a bit of a problem, but now the game checks if an object that existed at the moment of saving still exists at the moment of loading, and if not, it creates it. And vice versa. If it detects an object that no longer existed at the time of saving, it removes it. There are still many issues to solve and many more things to keep track of, but for this first demo it's fine. Most of the level will be played without weapons, which will only be acquired at the last checkpoint. So I don't really need to save stuff like the state of the enemies, the player bullets, all this stuff I can just ignore for now. I also created this cute little gadget that communicates the player's health status. It's located in the left hand, contrasting with the radar in the right one. The UI is diegetic and represents an electrocardiogram. As we take hits, it becomes increasingly red, and the heartbeat becomes faster and weaker. Besides being a clear nod to Resident Evil, I appreciate this solution because it doesn't give the player a perfectly clear measure of how much life they have left. Having a slight uncertainty should enhance the fear factor. To truly have something resembling a demo that I might release to the public one day, I also decided to create an initial and final menu. Simple things. The initial menu asks to choose between Oculus and Valve controllers, simply because they are gripped differently, or rather, they consider a different wrist curve as the default rotation. Before this realization, using only Valve controllers, when I tried to start the game with an Oculus headset, my hands were always rotated in a strange way. I would love to be able to control this automatically, but honestly I don't know how to do it. If anyone has an idea and wants to write it in the comments, it would be a big favor. For now, it's a player choice. Once the choice is made, the game starts automatically. The end level menu thanks for playing and gives the option to restart or to exit. Obviously, they are placeholder menus, but for their purpose, they will be sufficient. Once these strictly necessary things were done, I found the time to work on various embellishments. First of all, I developed all the VFXs related to the graph chain. This hologram serves to make the ammunition visible, but its aesthetic also provides the basis for the VFX look. A middle ground between a plasma trail from Tesla coils and a trail of liquid energy. When we use the ammo to overload our graph chain, the released energy crawls up through the arm, and when we throw objects, It results in a satisfying explosion of sparks. Also, now, when activating the graph chain, a connection forms between us and the levitating object. If we have no selected object, the trail appears straight in the direction we aim, with the hand. This way, it also helps with aiming. When this trail encounters an object, it connects to it and drags it toward us with a dynamic animation. After this, I moved on to give more life to the environments. For example, this mysterious room I showed you before, called the Cathedral by me, is lore-wise a room that deals with cooling the structure. Initially, and from playtesters' feedback, it wasn't clear at all, so I decided to get to work. I first created these cold vapors that remind me of liquid nitrogen that are released from inside the pillars. Subsequently, I also created a variant of the material that features a thin layer of ice that forms around the pillars. The ice is paintable thanks to vertex color, so I can decide where it goes and where it doesn't go on each individual object. To make the cold effect truly convincing, I also added a breath effect to the player, appearing when we enter the room and disappearing when we exit. From there, I worked on other VFX for the level. The sparks, the drips, and the flies. The flies were particularly fun. Taking a random photo of a dead fly and turning it into a living and animated fly was enjoyable. The flies are animated with a simple curl noise, but the result, in my opinion, is satisfying. We're getting close to the end of the video. In a VR world, it is important that the player feels they can interact with the environment, even in ways that aren't strictly tied to the core gameplay. So, the first thing I did in this regard was to add environmental interactables. I'm referring to crates, tools, more or less light objects that the player can lift and carry around. Naturally, the idea would have been to give physics to and make every object not fixed to the ground interactable, but it would have been impossible. As we will see in the next video, which will talk about optimization, to achieve good visual quality without sacrificing performances, a process called light baking is necessary. In this process, shadows are computed by the PC not in real time and painted on meshes to save the task of calculating them every frame. However, it only works for immobile objects. If they can move, they won't cast shadows, as we can see in the case of these movable crates. So I had to compromise on movable and fixed objects. I also added the hanging cables with physics and objects attached to the ceiling. I also tried to create more complex interactions. For example, this machinery. The player can feed in these organic waste cubes, and after pressing this lever, it will reward us with an oxygen tank, obtained from burning the waste. It provides hints about the function of these structures, and the tank can be torn from the rails and carried around. I have this half idea of turning them into explosive barrels. Finally, I decided to model the player's arm. Finally, no more white sausages with gloves stuck at the end. It's a minor change seemingly, but it's impressive the difference in immersion that seeing something incredible disappear behind the neck, where the shoulder would be, gives, in my opinion. And of course, even a game with only flying gloves can be extremely immersive, but I had set the goal of creating complete arms from the beginning, and I am happy to have finally modeled them. That's all for today. If you like what you see, like and subscribe to the channel. There are now 8 videos to watch, and the next one is already ready and will be out next month.